No?
All right, Jim, you want to
Oh,
take it away?
okay.
Jim has a nice presentation, so we're glad to have him back. Thanks, Jim.
Yep. So, for those that don't know, my name's Jim Logie. I'm the Airworthiness Fast Team Program Manager for the Baltimore FSDO. I'm also currently kind of doing double duty for the Washington FSDO as well, until their person gets trained up and running. So, the Fast Team, we're involved with issuing the wings credit, which you can reduce for your flight review time and stuff. The last couple of days I've been involved with inspection authorization renewal seminars, webinars. We had a webinar going yesterday with over 1,000 people online getting IA renewal credit. I don't have the numbers from today. And I interact with a group of about 7 of us called the Band of Brothers and a sister. There's a young lady that helps us out in the Denver area. So we're going to talk about mufflers and exhaust systems. It's kind of a prudent time of year, especially on a night like tonight. We're going to try to keep it brief and generic for certificated airplanes here like this 150 and the amateur built stuff. There's a lot of commonalities, and it's often exhaust systems are often overlooked, and in particular, having been a mechanic since 1982 myself, the recip engines, the smaller aircraft, all have this shroud that goes around the muffler, and that's where the majority of the heat comes from. It's kind of it's not kind of it's a pain in the neck taking that shroud off many times. Sharp edges and lots of little screws, and there's a number of cases where I can say, in doing investigations and so forth, where they don't get regularly removed. They should be removed at least every 100 hours in conjunction with a 100-hour inspection, or at least an annual. I know the amateur built community, a lot of you folks do your own condition inspections, so this will be some value added for that as well. So, any questions before let me see if this, lost my fingers, because sometimes me and IT. Okay, cool. So, I'll get away from the screen here. And exhaust systems, we're going to look at some accident data, a couple of different types of the exhaust systems, the heat exchangers, mufflers. Repairs, yes, they can be repaired. However, leave it to a professional. You don't want to take it. I wouldn't recommend taking it to the local weld shop to do it. Oftentimes it's Inconel steel and some other pretty technical metals and so forth. So next, here's some a little bit of accident data. You can see in 2019 there was only one fatal injury, but you can go to 2018 and then you can see there was one fatal and another one was pretty serious. I don't have current data. I'm working on it. Sometimes data can be a little bit delayed. The FAA is undergoing a number of computer systems changes in the last 2 years, and so I've been trying to get some more. So we talked about, let's see if this, I don't know if this pointer will work here. Here's what they call the heat exchanger. Oftentimes there's a piece of metal that's wrapped around there, and in which case the cabin heat is kind of like an old Volkswagen, makes its heat. If there's any leaks in it, it could result in a bad day. So that's but these things are notorious for cracking and some other problems. Once we get a little bit further along here, Tom graciously brought a muffler in off of was that off of 150, Tom?
172.
172, so it's just a whisker bigger. And you can see it's a pretty significant piece of hardware. Okay, so here's some damaged mufflers. Now, as I mentioned, this thing, it typically has a piece of sheet metal wrapped around there, and in which case it's extracting the heat from this. Inside is an area they call baffles. Not only do they help keep it quieter, it also is very important for the operation of the engine for back pressure in the cylinders and the valves. Remember I mentioned about they don't get necessarily the due diligence or the care that they should get. I doubt that happened a couple of hours ago. My guess is it's, Tom, you got a thought? You think that might have been a little bit more than an hour or two?
150 hours.
Yeah, so we'll leave that to your everybody else's prognosis.
That's off a Cardinal, and it's a pain to get the shroud off to do that stuff.
So there you go. So I don't have a whole bunch of Cardinal time. I have 182 and 210 time, as well as Navajo Chieftain time, and yeah, none of them are easy. So that's a pretty severe case. So here's a little bit better picture of the inside. You can see there in the notes that the exhaust flow was reduced by 89%. So you ask me, it probably wasn't making power either, especially at the end of the runway type situation. So this here in this story, the pilot and the passenger departed a runway in an amphibious airplane, and they said the rate of climb after takeoff was kind of slow, and it was apparent that the airplane wouldn't clear the trees, and so they elected to ditch it, I guess you could say, in the lake. Looks to me like one of the big errors there was he forgot to retract the gear too. He or she. We'll be gender neutral. Somebody didn't retract the gear. So I mentioned about having an appropriate facility repair them. There are repair stations that repair exhaust systems, and in the presentation, they say replace it with a new one, or properly repaired with the proper facility. And like I say, there's in-canal steel and stainless and all kinds of, I guess you could say, semi-precious metals. We talked about the heat muff that kind of wraps around here. Some aircraft, they have a whole bunch of little porcupine things that stick out there. That is to actually increase the transfer of the heat into the cabin. All those little rivet-looking things sticking out is another potential for a leak. So, kind of a food for thought thing there. The next thing here is V-band clamps. Typically speaking, you'll see those on the bigger airplanes, more higher performance, turbocharged. You'll see them all over on pressurized aircraft. Some of your Piper Mirages, and then larger stuff for anything from pressurization to de-ice, leading edge de-ice and some other things. There are specific ways that those things should be installed too, and we'll talk about that. But the primary focus here is we're going to talk about exhaust systems and things forward of the firewall, I guess you could say. So here's a picture of the V-band clamp where there was a failure just behind it. Another one there where a factory joint is with another one of the V-band clamps. You don't just put those V-band clamps on and get in there with your wrench and torque it. Can you hear the word torque? Yeah, you want to use a torque wrench. And we'll chat about that. This one here, you can see there's like a gasket in there. Some of those gaskets are directional sensitive. They have to go one way, not just flip a coin and say, gee, I think I got it. Thinking you got it sometimes isn't a good answer in aviation, is it? And then when you realize you didn't quite get it, then it might have been a case of, well, better luck next time. You don't want to be there. So there, like I say, there's some failure things. One of the things that I like to point out on aircraft exhaust systems, on your car, your lawnmower, a lot of times the exhaust gases are black. if you had a leak, right? Aircraft with a leaded fuel and whatnot is typically a little bit different color, gold, brown. It's not going to be black, like you will see typically, like I say, with more your more conventional engines. If anybody has anything to say, you're welcome to speak up here. This, I'm not enamored with this picture here. I do believe it's a King Air, but there's a number of V-band clamps in the King Air series aircraft for the pressurization, cabin pressurization. And being that it's a turbine engine, there is a potential to get carbon monoxide in the aircraft, but certainly not to the level you will have with a reciprocating, piston engine aircraft. So in this case, they had an exhaust system failure, and they had landed short, and it resulted in ADs. There's a number of ADs out on exhaust systems. One that comes to mind, and we're going to come to this slide later, is it's a cable on the Cessna, I want to say the 180 series, that there's a secondary cable that's put on the duct clamp for the turbocharger in case the V-band clamp comes apart and it doesn't completely fall off. And in some of those exhaust areas, not only do you have the hazard of the carbon monoxide, but the closer you get up to the engine, the hotter it is. And having done a number of setting turbochargers and so forth on the Navajo and some of the other aircraft that are similar, if you're running it at night, those stacks and whatnot are bright red, just like these sweaters that some of these folks have on. It's really something to see, and that just goes to show you how hard those engines and everything are working, at the high power settings. So if you're in a how many people are flying aircraft with turbochargers? None? No. Well, not necessarily. Thank you for speaking. There's road taxis out there with turbos on them now. There you go. He knows what I'm talking about. And those little rascals, small cubic inches, make those turbochargers make that little engine think it's pretty strong. And there's a lot of heat. And Frank's pretty smart on the situation as it applies to his gyrocopters and whatnot. So the V-band clamp in itself, as it says here, it does uniform and equal around it. I mentioned torquing it with a torque wrench, preferably calibrated. And when I've installed them, I like to have a plastic hammer and I tap around there to make sure it's well seated as you're torquing it, because you will be amazed how much more that thing seats around those flanges when you're torquing it up and getting her on there. So once tightened, it actually reduces the. So the bolt and the nut is not what holds that together. When it's properly installed, the V in it is actually takes a lot of the load off that hardware and does a much better job of keeping it in place. Don't expect the V-band clamp to make things in alignment. It wants to naturally be aligned before you put the clamp on. So if you're forcing it, it's probably going to break. And I don't mean the clamp as much as that the exhaust system will have a failure. Back here on this, okay, the next one we do cover it. We mentioned the gaskets. Another nice practice is to safety it. There's a number of different methods in which to safety it. Those that are familiar, if you're not familiar, I'd offer it. FAA Advisory Circular AC 4313, 43-13, will give a great insight on safety wire techniques. And you can see here, that's one of the V-band clamps. There's a little bit of safety wire on there. And this one is riveted together. Some are riveted and some are spot welded. I can't say that one's better than the other because they both on occasion will fail. This is a turbocharged engine, as you can see there. And that discoloration up there is normal. That thing, as I mentioned, it gets pretty hot.
Cherry red.
Sir?
It gets cherry red.
Certainly on the stacks. Not as much there. This is pretty beefy. That's pretty significant. But at the exhaust stacks coming off the engine, you can bet your biscuits those things are some kind of red. So here we go. Cautions. As I mentioned, it needs to naturally be lined up. And you can see there that this is a factory weld, a stack that's been to a reputable repair facility, i.e. a repair station. It should look nice like that. If it's globular and stuff like that, you've been had. It's not going to hold. And it would have been, in a worst case scenario, you take it to a good shop, they may not even be able to repair it. So, don't be an Ollie's bargain basement when it comes to your exhaust system. Not that I have anything against Ollie's. Good stuff, G. Sometimes. Yeah. So make sure that, so if this bottoms out here before it's torqued, it's likely because the clamp is stretched or deformed in some manner. Okay. Something else here that's worthy of noting, this is a lock nut. It should have friction, they call it drag torque. Depending on the size of the nut, determines how much that drag torque you should have, i.e. you should not be able to turn it on with your fingers. That's grounds to throw it away. In many cases, it's a stainless steel or Inconel or some kind of special metal. It's not a nut that has that plastic in it, a fiber lock nut. Yes, I've seen those used on engine compartments. I'll just say it's not a good idea. Moreover, it doesn't end well. It's just not a good idea. And yes, there's a little bit more vibration going on up inside an aircraft engine compartment than people necessarily feel, because the engine isolation mounts, the rubber mounts and so forth, do a great job on. So if anybody has their camera and they want to take a picture of this QR code here, it's a great video from GE Engines. I'll give you guys a moment. Okay, well maybe you can share it with the chapter in your newsletter when you have the next new chapter newsletter. How's that? But it's a great video. I've used it multiple times with the A&P school there in Hagerstown. They go, wow, that makes a lot more sense now. Okay, remember I mentioned with a tapping it with a plastic hammer? They say rubber mallet. It's not a 40-pound dead blow. It's just a nice, I'm sure you have one around in here, just a little tap, 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 tap. And customarily, let's see if I go back to it. I'll start on the back side and work my way this way. Don't start here and work your way. Start here, even Steven, all the way around. You can see there's a little bit of a groove in there. There's openings in that ring that allow it to flex. Safety wire if needed or desired. So we're going to have some pictures here of systems going wrong. And there's a blowout there on the outlets on the turbocharger. I hold my tongue. I was going to say the outlet side, but there you go. 1,300 degrees. That's pretty toasty. And when do you think you're going to have your highest exhaust temperatures? Probably takeoff at the end of the runway, right? What aircraft do you think might have be most susceptible to exhaust system failures? Maybe a training airplane? Lots of takeoffs and landings? Yeah. Not to say that they're unsafe, but it's just worth that little bit extra level of detail. Even here in the chapter, you have a number of different people flying the aircraft, right? A little bit difference in pilot techniques and leaning techniques, and all those different things can affect the system. So here's a point that I have in here. Exhaust leaks are inherently much more dangerous than induction leaks because of the very serious threat of in-flight fire. Fortunately, exhaust leaks are a little easier to detect. Has anybody got a carbon monoxide indicator in an airplane? Yeah, is it one of those little kind of tan things? It's a triangle or whatever? Okay. Most those ones that kind of an ambient sensor, it's just whether it's a plastic one, whether it's paper, there's a very distinct life limit on them. Some of them are as short as 30 days. Read the package. So doing a little bit of research on some of those, I looked into the cost of the electronic ones, and after about 2 years worth of those plastic ones, you can probably buy an electric one. I had a conversation with a pilot that did experience a carbon monoxide event, and a couple of weeks ago, and he said, "Oh yeah, we went down to Walmart and bought a couple of those kitty ones that you put in the house." Well, that's about as accurate as a hand grenade. They can take an inordinate amount of time to sound off, and it might take. They're just calibrated to a gazillion different standards. So, back to the ollies, I guess. But at least they made an effort, right? I'll say it's a little bit of an effort. It's better than nothing. But yeah. So that's food for thought.
What do you know about the Delta Zulu headsets that have it built in? Lightspeed has a headset now that has a carbon monoxide detector in it.
I haven't seen that. That's crazy. Cool. Yeah. Well, hopefully. Well, that's interesting. I could go on about it. So about noise canceling headsets, they are really cool, but you got to make sure it's plugged into your audio panel. I can't tell you how many Moonies I've investigated gear up landings on. They bought the Moonie, they go out and buy their nice Lightspeed or the Bose headsets, and they don't have the gear horn or flap horn wired through the audio panel. They go on link, what's it do? The headset cancels the horn. Yeah, it just those headsets, they just got expensive. So you know, it's one of those forest through the trees kind of things. So always when you get noise canceling headsets, make sure your aural warnings are wired through them. A whole bunch of talking on that one. I've got concentration. That's a win when you got him talking. You want to share?
I was asking, I'm so sorry, I was asking him, so what happens when your Bose headset, hopefully not, cancels out the horn? And he said nothing, and then he starts explaining why. Because my son just started flying, and I didn't think about that when I bought the noise canceling headset, and that's terrifying.
See, that's why we're here. We share stuff like that, It's just one of those aha moments, right? Yeah, so, poor mom, right? So, anyway, good stuff.
Especially after buying a Bose.
Pardon?
Really poor after buying a Bose headset.
Yeah, well, you know what? I can tell you when you buy a new airplane, they give you Bose headsets. Anyway, as we roll along here, so here's another damaged exhaust system, one that was failed, and so the pilot in this case was doing a cross-country flight after purchasing the aircraft. Flew about an hour and 20 minutes, and we'll just say that the guy was overcome by carbon monoxide because it spiraled in. And oops. Anyway, but that's what you can see what happened. That's carbon monoxide is a real deal. So this is this exhaust system on the same aircraft. You can see there's a pinhole, and I'm sure that was one of a few on that event. This is another one. I'm not much on the gory pictures. We don't need to be scared. We just need to be smart, right? And that's the exhaust system off the aircraft on that previous one. Pretty bad shape. Probably been leaking a while. I think it's pretty darn safe to say it's been leaking for a while. And as I said, they're just not respected enough. Another item that doesn't get very well respected is tires. In this case, they found that there was also a failed bearing on the turbocharger just prior to, probably led to increased temperatures over a period of time. When turbocharger bearings fail, oftentimes they pass oil. What does oil do? It ignites, right? It's just a petroleum-based product. And one of the terms that's used with exhaust systems when you have a leak, this is a motor glider. When you have a leak, is those hot gases coming out. They call it torching, and it'll actually cut the hole. It'll make it worse. So anyways, this was a motor glider. They dropped the passenger off, and they experienced an exhaust system, and there you go. So some of that is damage from the accident, but you can also see that doesn't look like a very fresh brake, does it? If it were fresh, it would be polished, shiny in these areas. Again, under Part 91 aircraft, you only have to do an annual inspection, right? Once a year. Whether you put on 2 hours or 1,000 hours. So the power is in your hands as far as making your decision. There's another one that this was an experimental aircraft that happened to have floats, and there's his exhaust system of a damaged muffler fan. And of course, and that's the internal external.
These failures that you're showing us are pretty gross.
They are pretty tough. Yes.
Yes. No. What my point is, what would be something that would be a telltale sign that you're not there yet, but you're getting there? In other words, these are all massive failures.
Yes. Well, actually, I'm glad. Thank you, Steve. Right?
Yes.
Thank you, Steve. I have some pictures at the end that you can check. I just got them today from one of my counterparts in Iowa. He just got some pictures from last week that he forwarded to me. This is a fresh air vent. This is an interesting story. Remember I mentioned about the cable, a lanyard cable to help hold the turbocharger duct in place should the V-band clamp fail? This aircraft never had the cable put on. And it was part of an AD that I do believe went back to like 1999. Why it wasn't done, I don't know. We're all supposed to comply with ADs. That's regulatory. So the aircraft in this case, they took off. It was a pilot and a passenger. They took off. They started getting smoke in the cockpit. They said, gee whiz, kind of thing. Opened the window, realized that's not going to work. So they closed the window, put on one of those little plastic hoodie kind of things that Sporty sells and whatnot. Still had a lot of difficulty seeing. He took it back off. Tried to cock the airplane in such a manner to get some airflow through. Got the thing down real quick, and this is what they found once they got it on the ground. It had literally come off, melted did some. I got another picture. No, I don't. Did some melting the battery boxes up in this area here. Did some damage there. These are wires. Did some damage there. Lot of heat, as I said, lot of heat. One of the things that looking into having exhaust, let's call this a catastrophic failure, right? I mean, that's kind of an immediate failure that's a big deal. One of the things that you can do as a pilot when you say, gee whiz, I've got an immediate exhaust failure, reduce power, right? As long as you can sustain flight, if you reduce power, you're going to reduce some of that heat, right? Mind you, you've got to be aware of trees and all those kind of things, right? But if you can reduce power, you can reduce some of that heat. So as Steve mentioned, I just got these following pictures today, the next 7 slides. You can see 12/2/24, this is a couple of days ago. So you see in there how we mentioned the baffle? There's a baffle that's deteriorated, okay? There's another deteriorated baffle. These things will create more back pressure. You may have a reduction in power as it gets more severe. Let me grab this muffler back here. We'll start in the front of the room and let it go back. This is, as Tom said, this is a 172 muffler. You can look inside there and you can see it's not good. Okay. There's another deteriorated baffle, and as we said, heat, right? A lot of heat cycles. If a person has a 30-year-old airplane, it's probably a 30-year-old muffler because that muffler ain't cheap. I don't know how much one of those mufflers cost. Tom, do you know what one of those mufflers costs these days? Off the top of your head?
This one that I replaced was like $1,100.
Okay. So that's real money. That's not one of those things you want your mechanic to tell you they need at their annual, but as we've seen here, sometimes you just gotta spend the bucks. There's another crack at a flange. One of the best things you can do when you're doing a pre-flight is a good mirror and a flashlight. I don't care the sunniest day, I pre-flight with a flashlight because there's too many places that are dark that you just can't see. So this is another exhaust muffler. It looks pretty normal here, but this one here, we're going to get some more detail on a leak. And there you go. See the white? It's not black. It's actually white. There's another picture.
That's from the heat scorching it?
Well, a lot of the color is because it's leaded fuel. So it's going to be a different color, exactly. That wouldn't be the torching. The pictures we saw previously where it was really burned out would be a picture of the torching. And that, as I say, that's kind of a catastrophic failure. Hopefully you have maintenance before that. So I do these things to share information for people, and we mentioned about FAAsafety.gov. There's some great free courses, take about an hour, on exhaust systems on that FAAsafety.gov website, and it's have your service information, inspect closely. I love flashlights and mirrors, and like I say, and then people are relying on us, and carbon monoxide is definitely not our friend, and This is one of the safety.gov courses that you can use. You can take a look. You can. I hope everybody here has an account on safety.gov. And the FAA won't sell your email address, I promise. SMS, we're supposed to make mention of this. SMS is coming. It's all ready for the people that are flying charter and air tours. If anybody's here doing rides and they've got an air tour letter of authorization, you have to have an SMS program by 2027. And another QR code. And you want that QR? There you go. Hold your horses, Jimmy.
Mine said page not found. Maybe it's internet.
Oh, it might be. Yeah. Okay, any questions?
Can I relate a couple of personal experiences?
By all means.
Back in the early 80s, 1980s, we had a respected chapter member by the name of John Beers. Okay? John was a retired World War II Navy pilot. He flew the Navy version of the B-24 in the Pacific during World War II. Joined our chapter as an early member, and he was an electrical engineer by trade. So somewhere in the 80s, early 80s, I guess, John decided he was going to build an airplane. And he did. He spent 4 or 5 years building an airplane. And I can't remember the name of the model airplane he built.
Bacon Deuce.
What? Baking Deuce, exactly. For those of you who do not know what a Baking Deuce is, it's a parasol, high-wing parasol, two-place side-by-side airplane, tail dragger. And I think John had an 0290 Lycoming engine in the airplane. After a couple of years flying the airplane, he decided he was going to fly down to Sun Fun with his airplane. So he takes off out of Frederick on the way to Sun and Fun, planning to make a fuel stop somewhere in Virginia. I don't remember exactly where it was. In any event, remember, this is an open cockpit parasol airplane. I want to emphasize open cockpit. John landed in Virginia, got out of the airplane, and immediately collapsed on the ramp beside his airplane. He woke up in the hospital. Carbon monoxide poisoning. Okay? So you think biplanes are not susceptible to carbon monoxide poisoning? Good example. Okay? John, I don't know what was the cause of the exhaust leak, but it was somewhere, and it got into the cockpit and overcame John. Luckily, he was able to land the airplane, but collapsed thereafter. My own experience: for 10 years, I flew as a flight engineer on C-97 airplanes. C-97s have 4 R-4360 Pratt & Whitney engines, 28 cylinders apiece. And one of my jobs was every hour I used to compute a new cruise power setting, unlean the engines, set the new cruise power setting, and do an ignition analyzer scan. We had an oscilloscope. You could look at every spark plug on every engine, all 56 plugs on each engine, all 4 magnetos, and so forth. So during that process, I used to do an analyzer scan. One night we were coming home from somewhere, and I pick up an open primary on 1 cylinder. Oh, no big deal. Still got 55 plugs working. Okay, so we come home. I go into work the next day. The maintenance officer calls me up. He says, "Come on down here, I want to show you something." So I go down, they got the airplane in the hangar, engine uncowed, and the open primary was a burnt through primary lead going to 1 spark plug. Exactly what the analyzer showed. But the aluminum cylinder fins adjacent to the exhaust leak that burnt through the primary lead started to melt the aluminum cylinder head fins. And we were lucky that the cylinder head fins melted away but didn't go any further. you got to remember on turbocharged engines, that exhaust system stream upstream from the turbocharger is pressurized. And that exhaust stream is like an acetylene torch. So you can't deny the good safety precautions, inspection criteria for exhaust systems.
I appreciate that. That is nothing like the story from the field. Now, Mr. Steve asked a question about something, an easy way that you can inspect your system. One of the things that has been known to be done, and it's pretty effective, take your shop vac and put it on your outlet of your exhaust system where it blows out, and get yourself some soap bubbles. And if there's a crack, it'll just be like a leak in your tire. You'll have a lot of little soap bubbles. So that's, would that help answer?
It does.
Yeah, real easy and cheap.
And
So
the shop vac won't have any back pressure issues into the engine.
it shouldn't be enough. No, that's not that
It's not
much.
enough.
No, yes, ma'am. Oh, any other questions?